In this lesson, we're going to look at preparing your local system to run Drupal 8. This demo is being done on a Mac running Mac OS X, but the concepts are the same regardless of your operating system. I highly recommend that you review the installation guide on Drupal.org, which you can find by going to Drupal.org, following the link to Documentation, and then choosing the second option here, Installation Guide. This will give you all of your options for running Drupal, as well as give you some insights into how Drupal works and why it has the specific structure and requirements that it does. In order to run Drupal on your local system or web server, you're going to need to be running an AMP stack or similar. AMP, spelled A-M-P, stands for Apache, which is the web server, MySQL, which is the database server, and PHP. Many advanced users, especially those who develop on Linux, will use a VirtualBox setup. Many PC users, whether they use Mac or Windows, will use MAMP, which is a great tool for running Apache, MySQL, and PHP on your local computer, or they'll use something like XAMPP, which is another tool that you can use to run Apache, MySQL, and PHP on your local computer. MAMP can be found at mamp.info, mamp.info. XAMPP can be found at sourceforge.net/projects/XAMPP. A Google search for either of these tools will also bring up the links to their download pages at the top level. Since you are just getting started with Drupal, I'm going to recommend and demonstrate the easiest way for you to get set up locally, which is to use Acquia Dev Desktop. Let's take a look at that on the Acquia site. You can find Acquia Dev Desktop at acquia, acquia.com/downloads. This particular solution is completely optimized for Drupal. So when you install it, everything that you need for Drupal and the proper configuration will be set up for you right from the get-go. This will be the same whether you're using a Mac or Windows. And you can see here that Acquia has provided a Mac download and a Windows download right here. Acquia is a well-known digital experience company that both works with and actively supports Drupal at a very high level, including offering resources to people just getting started with Drupal. Their Dev Desktop is a major step forward in making it easy for individuals to get Drupal running on their local desktops with ease. So we're going to go ahead and download the installer and run it. Now that the installer is downloaded, I can go ahead and click on the Acquia Dev Desktop installer here to continue this process. I trust this particular application. I've used it before and I know where it came from, so I'm going to select Open and let it run. I'm going to close this window behind here to clean up this interface a little bit, and now we'll walk through the steps on the installer. You'll see here under the "You are about to install the following" it says Acquia Dev Desktop, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and PHP Myadmin, so I know exactly what I'm getting as I'm going to go through this installer. Obviously, I need to accept the terms of the license agreement in order to use this. It's also a nice thing for me to allow diagnostic data to be sent to Acquia for the use of Dev Desktop, since they are providing this tool for free. So I'll go ahead and click Next. Now it's going to ask me both where I want to store Dev Desktop itself as an application, which I'll put into my Applications directory. It's also going to ask me where it needs to store the sites. This is important because the sites will be all of the files that go with Drupal, both the Drupal code and also any images, attachments, CSS files, anything that you create that goes with the site and needs to be part of it. So we'll click Next here. Since you're using your local system, you're going to need to have ports assigned to the different things that Acquia Dev Desktop needs to do. I suggest leaving these at their defaults unless you have a very strong reason to need to use different port numbers. And we'll click Next, and now it's installing Acquia Dev Desktop. I'll go ahead and launch Acquia Dev Desktop after clicking Finish. That sounds like a nice thing to do, then I don't have to hunt for it in the Applications folder. Now I need to decide what I'm going to do in order to get set up with Drupal. I have my Apache, MySQL, and PHP stack here, which is available using Acquia Dev Desktop. So now I need a Drupal site in my stack. I'm going to start from scratch because at this time, there is no existing Drupal site that we're working with, but we need to create one. Now I have a bunch of options available to me. It's asking which Drupal distribution would I like to start with. Drupal distributions are definitely worth taking a look at because there are all kinds of packages out there that might satisfy most of the requirements that you may have for a specific site. In this case, however, we're looking for Drupal 8. So I'm going to scroll down and I just want clean vanilla Drupal 8. So here's clean vanilla Drupal, which will give me the current version of Drupal that's being considered appropriate for production use. That would be Drupal 7 at the time of recording this video because Drupal 8 is still in beta. If I scroll down a little bit further, it's going to give me access to Drupal 8. It is warning me right now that Drupal 8 is only in beta release and is only provided for development and should not be used on production. I'm going to go ahead and click Install. And now it's going to ask me a few things. Where do I want the code base to be stored? It's going to default to the directory that I told Acquia Dev Desktop to use for sites, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that as it is. It's also asking me for a local site name. This is going to be the URL that I'm going to use to access the site when I go into my browser. Because it's local, it's going to use the port number rather than something like .com or .net. So in this case, I'll just call it Drupal Beta 10. We'll keep it all lowercase for fun. And then you'll see here that I have a local site URL, which is drupalbeta10.dd for Dev Desktop, and then the port number. It's asking me which version of PHP I want to use. I'll go ahead and leave this at the default. And it's going to ask me if I want to create a new database or if I want to make use of something else. In this case, I want to create a new one. It's also asking me what I want the database name to be. So I could change this. By default, it's going to be the same as your local site name. And then I'll go ahead and click Finish. Not only is it downloading Drupal, but it's also setting up a database for me because my Drupal site is going to need to have a database in order to work, because the database is where all of the content that is created by the user is going to be stored. Now Acquia Dev Desktop is showing me that my site has been created. It's telling me where the local database is. I can go ahead and actually click on this to take a look at the database. It's showing me where the code is located, and I could click on that to go directly to the code itself. And it's showing me the URL for the local site if I want to take a look at this site. So let's actually take a look at some of these. I'm going to click on the local code first, and it pops me directly into the folder and shows me my Drupal code right here. If I click on the local database, it's going to launch PHP Myadmin, and I can see the database right here. There are no tables in it yet because I haven't installed Drupal. When I actually run the Drupal installer, then this will fill out with a lot of tables. And if I click on the site itself, it's going to take me to the install page for my Drupal site so that I can run the Drupal installer and actually have my site up and running. You can use PHP Myadmin to set up your own databases if you need to, as well as to create usernames and passwords for those databases. You can easily get to PHP Myadmin by clicking on any one of the database names for any site that you've created in Dev Desktop. So if we go back to this here, we're in PHP Myadmin, and we can go ahead and create new databases right here. You do not typically need to know how to work with MySQL to be a Drupal site builder. You will rarely work with the database, if ever, until you are more advanced or need to deploy your site to production. As you become more adventurous with Drupal, however, you should take the time to understand the database. This is, however, a separate topic from what this video course covers. If you have more than one site in development, you can add multiple sites to Acquia Dev Desktop. You can do this by clicking on the little plus icon at the bottom here and setting up a new Drupal site, or importing a local Drupal site if needed. In this lesson, we covered what you need to run a Drupal site locally or on your server. We also went over the easiest way to get Drupal up and running on your computer. Next, we're going to take a look at the file system, and then we're going to run the Drupal installer.